What if I told you that the most powerful way to dismantle a narcissist isn't with screaming matches, ultimatums, or even revenge, but with silence, not just any silence, but the deep, soul-anchored silence of an empath who finally says enough. Not with rage, not with resistance, but with awakening. And when this moment arrives, it doesn't just break the narcissist's illusion, it annihilates it. Carl Jung once said that the most devastating weapon against a narcissist isn't fury, it's an empath who sees through the illusion and chooses themselves. And what follows this awakening? Even Jung himself was astonished by what he discovered. The hidden war empaths versus narcissists. According to Carl Jung, the pioneering psychoanalyst who gave birth to analytical psychology, there exists a psychological war most people don't see. It isn't fought with weapons, it's fought with energy, with emotions, with illusions. It's the invisible dance between two deeply contrasting forces, the narcissist and the empath. And most never realize they're dancing until the music stops. Jung observes something chilling. Narcissists do not fear confrontation. They thrive on it. Anger feeds them. Conflict eats them. What terrifies them is clarity. The moment an empath sees through the mask, not with hatred, but with neutrality. Not with vengeance, but with detachment. This is the moment the narcissist loses all control, because the empath has exited the emotional theater, and the narcissist no longer has an audience. The empath's gift and their curse. Jung noted that empaths possess an almost otherworldly sensitivity. They don't just hear words, they feel the vibrations beneath them. They sense what's not being said. They tune into the frequency of unspoken pain, hidden motives, and suppressed truth. This sensitivity is both a divine gift and a dangerous vulnerability, because those who weaponize emotions, narcissists, see the empath as a prime target, not because they're weak, but because they're deeply open. Their compassion, their willingness to understand, to heal, to hold space for others, becomes the very net that ensnares them. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what happens when that reaction is toxic? What happens when one of those substances isn't seeking connection but control? When one personality isn't meeting the other but consuming it?" The trap, love as a mirage. In Jung's deep observations, he identified the most tragic illusion that keeps empaths trapped: belief. Not ignorance, not weakness, belief. Belief in redemption, in the power of love to transform, in the idea that if they just love harder, understand deeper, stay a little longer, the narcissist will finally reveal their true self. But here's what Jung realized, what many empaths can't bring themselves to admit. For the narcissist, the mask isn't a disguise. The mask is the person. There's nothing underneath to rescue. No hidden wounded child waiting to be healed. What you see, that carefully crafted manipulative persona, is the full extent of their identity. And to the empath, that realization is soul-crushing, because they weren't just loving someone, they were loving a performance. The moment the narcissist knows they've lost, the narcissist senses they're losing control long before the empath fully understands what's happening. It starts subtly, a lie that doesn't land, a manipulative tactic that falls flat, a moment of need met with apathy, and for the first time, the empath doesn't react the way they always have. Jung recognized this exact turning point. He called it the psychological shift. It's not an explosion, it's an unraveling. The empath begins to question, to see cracks in the carefully polished surface, to feel inconsistencies between words and actions. And with each crack, the illusion begins to crumble. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung warned, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the awakening, when the empath realizes that what they thought was love was actually control. That realization doesn't just hurt, it shatters the psyche. Because everything they built their identity on, the belief in love's power to redeem, suddenly feels like a lie. The three transformations of the empowered empath. Jung identified a psychological transformation in empaths, one that unfolds in three distinct phases. Phase 1, emotional detachment. This isn't coldness, this is sacred distance, a quiet internal severing from the emotional loops that once kept them enmeshed in the narcissist's world. It's not about saying goodbye, It's about saying this no longer defines me. This kind of detachment doesn't happen overnight. It's the product of profound inner reckoning, of recognizing how deeply the narcissist had shaped not just their feelings, but their identity. Because narcissists don't just manipulate emotions, they shape environments where the empath's worth is tied to performance, to pleasing, to self-erasure. And walking away isn't just about leaving the narcissist. It's about reclaiming the self they forgot they had. Previously, we explored the empath's first awakening, the moment they begin emotionally detaching from the narcissist's illusion. But liberation doesn't stop there. It deepens, it sharpens, and ultimately it transforms the empath from a silent sufferer into something far more powerful, a fully integrated self. Shadow work, confronting the unseen. Breaking this toxic cycle isn't just about walking away. It's about turning inward into the darkest corners of the self. Carl Jung referred to this inner journey as shadow work, painful but necessary act of facing parts of ourselves we've tried to deny or ignore. And for the empath, this is where the real work begins. You see, many empaths don't stay in narcissistic relationships because of love. They stay because they're afraid of who they might be without the role they've been playing. Caretaker, healer, fixer, forgiver. Their very identity has become tangled in those labels woven into the emotional knots the narcissist expertly pulls. And here lies the cruel twist: the narcissist knows this. They exploit it again and again because it works. But Jung saw a way out. True freedom begins when the empath starts to ask the hard questions, not to the narcissist, but to themselves. Why am I apologizing for their behavior? Why do I feel guilty for needing space? Why does my peace make me feel selfish? The power of silence and non-reaction. Jung discovered something remarkable about awakened empaths. They begin to wield silence as a psychological weapon, not through passivity, but through presence. It's not what the empath says that terrifies a narcissist. It's what they stop saying. No more explanations, no more emotional bandages, no more apologies for simply existing. This brings us to the second major transformation. Jung identified the power of non-reaction. Narcissists thrive on emotional fuel. They need someone to provoke, manipulate, and control. That back and forth exchange, drama, conflict, chaos is how they regulate their fractured inner self. But what happens when the empath doesn't respond? Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of clarity. What happens when the empath simply refuses to play the game? Jung noted this silence isn't weakness, it's rebellion. A quiet declaration: you no longer have access to me. And this declaration, though silent, is thunderous in the narcissist's psyche. The narcissists collapse when manipulation fails. Sensing the empath's withdrawal, the narcissist typically escalates. They cycle through tactics, guilt, charm, threats, even vulnerability. They may cry, beg, or turn on the charisma that once enchanted. But something has shifted. The empath doesn't respond. They don't bite the bait. And for the first time, they don't need closure, because they've outgrown the story. As Jung observed, true closure doesn't come from the narcissist, it comes from no longer needing anything from them at all. That's when it happens. The narcissist feels it, the moment of absolute loss, not just of power, but of relevance, because the empath has done something the narcissist never expected. They found their voice. Phase 3, reclaiming the true voice. The third and most powerful transformation Jung described is this: the empath discovers their authentic voice, not the reactive voice that once stammered to justify, explain, or beg for understanding, but a new voice, a grounded, integrated voice, a voice that names things without fear. This was manipulation. This wasn't love. This isn't my story anymore. Jung believed in the ancient power of naming. To name something is to define it, to place it within a conscious framework. And when the empath names the truth out loud, they reclaim authorship of their life. They're no longer living inside the narcissist's script. They're writing their own. Thriving, the final transformation. Jung made a powerful discovery. Thriving after narcissistic abuse doesn't just liberate the empath, it destroys the narcissist's illusion. Because the narcissist's greatest fear is not rejection. It's irrelevance. When the empath not only survives but grows, evolves, and shines brighter than ever, the narcissist is confronted with a truth that they've avoided all their lives. They were never the source of the empath's light. They were only standing in the way of it. Narcissists need to be the central character in someone else's story. But when the empath thrives, that fantasy collapses. And for the narcissist, that's not just painful, it's annihilation. The final boundary: individuation. Jung identified one final psychological boundary that makes the awakened empath completely immune to narcissistic manipulation. Individuation. This is the process of becoming fully oneself, integrated whole, and no longer living from wounds but from wisdom. An individuated empath sets boundaries not out of fear or anger, but from deep self-respect. These boundaries aren't rigid walls. They're frameworks for freedom. They don't just keep the wrong people out. They invite the right people in. The most terrifying act, Jung said, is to accept yourself completely. And for empaths who've endured narcissistic abuse, that self-acceptance becomes a revolution. They realize that saying no isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Self-care isn't selfish, it's sacred. Worth isn't measured by how much you give, it already exists within you. The ultimate victory: self-reclamation. In the end, Jung revealed why healed empaths hold a psychological power far beyond the relationship itself, because once they've integrated the shadow, once they've made the unconscious conscious, they no longer need to fight the narcissist at all. Their presence becomes the proof that the narcissist's tactics don't work forever. That manipulation has limits. That freedom is real. And that healing is not just possible, but inevitable. The most dangerous person to a narcissist, Jung believed, is the empath who no longer needs them at all, because that empath has become whole. Closing call to action. Your boundaries, as Jung might say, are not just limits. They are the architecture of your freedom. Build them with care, guard them with love, and let them turn your life not into a battlefield, but into a sanctuary. Thank you so much for walking this journey with me. If today's message resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone who might need it. You never know who's quietly waiting for permission to reclaim themselves.